welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are gearing up for the top 4 teams in the Metro Division today, as we have kind of tracked through most of the playoff teams through the NHL. That's our goal. Most of the teams in playoff contention, I should say, which in the Metro, in my humble opinion, there are only 4 teams that will make the playoffs. And the Blue Jackets 8 points out. They're out. I don't care. They're 7-3 in their last 10. I don't care. They're out. So we're looking at a four team race here to see who maybe could jostle for position. That's about all we've got. Do you have thoughts to the contrary, Justin?
You know, I still would like to put Columbus in the what if maybe they might just squeeze in scenario. And we'll talk about it a little bit more with Washington, but I have some worries for them, and we will get into that for sure, especially with my trade needs for them. And so, yeah, I think. By the way, hello and welcome back.
Yeah, true. I was in Florida. It was not watching a hockey game. I wish I was, but I wasn't really anywhere. Well, I wasn't that close. I was in Orlando. We did the Disney thing, you know.
No,
Not honestly, I actually saw multiple Kraken shirts while I was there.
Really?
Didn't really see much of anything else. Didn't see any not. I don't think I saw any Lightning or Panthers gear, which I get. Like Orlando is such a touristy spot, especially where we are, right? Like it's Disney. It's funny when you're driving around. The one thing I noticed at one point, I went, man, everybody has a new car around here. Right. They're all rentals, right? So, and when I got back, or like when we started driving home, it was like, oh, people do have garbage cars. This is where all the crappy cars went onto 75. But yeah, it was a fun trip. The kid had fun. You know, she's only 18 months, so she'll never remember it. But
I was gonna say, how much of that does she?
But she was free.
Know?
She's free. Disney doesn't charge you for under 2, so I don't know how. What would Disney do if you brought your 2.5-year-old and you said she's 23 months? What are they going to make you pull out a birth certificate?
They just might get that petty about
That's
it.
That's true. They might.
Probably.
They might.
Hopefully not.
It is Disney. They're going to call the mouse, and they're going to take you in a back room, and he's gonna break you, pull it right out.
I don't know if you listen or if came across it at all, but there's this like TikTok funny Instagram story that keeps popping up on my feed all the time, and it's literally like Mickey Mouse in the Hood is what it's called, and it's just Mickey Mouse just open the door, Donald, and then next thing you know, you start hearing like pounding on the door, and he's just like, Goofy's just go away, bitch, and you start hearing him smacking Goofy around, and Donald chimes in, and dude, it's the funniest thing ever, and it keeps popping up on my feed all the time.
Nice. I'll have to look up Gangster Mickey and
fantastic.
Show it to my 18-month-old. It sounds right up her alley. She loves that stuff.
Beautiful.
All right, well, let's dive into what we've got going on in the Metro Division. I say we start at the top. That just makes sense to me to kind of just go in with the team that has, in my opinion, the most to lose this season, because they're definitely all in. They've had some heartbreaks the last few years and haven't gotten as far as maybe they hoped. And the Carolina Hurricanes won't run into who they lose to the Islanders. Now I'm blanking on who they lost to. I'll have to look that up.
Everybody's lost to the Islanders the last few years.
Right. But the Hurricanes, I think, this is the best iteration we've seen of the Hurricanes, maybe ever. Even though they won the Cup in 2006, that wasn't really expected. Nobody had them as the Cup winners. I don't think, if my revisionary history is correct, I don't think anyone had them as the Cup winners. Or that many teams. They were kind of like a middling team, and they peaked at the right time.
Nobody expected Edmonton to get there either.
True. Yeah, because Edmonton was the 8th seed going up against the powerful Red Wings, and it was kind of the Red. Think the Red Wings won the Cup 2 years later, and it was Yzerman's last little swan song. And do you ever go back and think about this? That if the Red Wings had just forced Yzerman to retire, that maybe they would have had a competent player in his shoes, and they might have won that series and then won the cup.
Bad form.
Sorry, Stevie. He'll never
Dwayne
come on the
Rolison
show
was playing
now.
at another level, so
Yeah, right. Yeah, Steve Yzerman will never come on the show now.
oh.
All right, Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously, they're tops in the division. They're quite far ahead. I'd say it's kind of them and Colorado. They're the only team that could maybe push Colorado for that President's Trophy. Although Tampa Bay is giving everybody a run for their money right now. Have won 5 in a row, 8-1-1 in their last 10. But it doesn't look like they'll be able to catch Colorado. Carolina, they're kind of there. If they win their next game, they're 3 points back, same games played. So they do have a shot. With the team sitting pretty in first in the Metro, things have been going well all year. What do you see this team doing down the stretch? Because they have a nice setup. Their goaltending's good. They've got a good defense. They've got a lot of depth on defense. Is this a scenario where they're just going for depth pieces and maybe a forward?
Sure. I mean, right, most of those teams towards the top, right, they don't go out and make big splashes. They tend to, play it quiet and just get a couple depth pieces. Really, outside of Boston, not too many times do we see a team at the top of the division want to really upset that chemistry, right? But, I mean, let's be honest, this is the Carolina Hurricanes. They're a team that likes to make big splashes. They don't like to go in for the depth pieces. And so, to me, I think this is a team that's poised to, especially because, again, this is a team that wants to go all in this season, especially with the Islanders looking like they're not going to make the playoffs. This might be the time to do it. To me, a top 4 defenseman just smells right for this team. And I say that because, you look at Tony DeAngelo, right? He's been phenomenal, playing way better than anybody thought he was going to play, especially at that $1 million contract. Jacob Slavin, phenomenal defender, playing great hockey. Brett Pesce is a great defensive defenseman back there and another great top 4 piece. But Brady Shea, he's been okay this year for me. I don't have a problem with him. But I think, honestly, he might be somebody who's better suited for a third line, second power play unit type guy. And so that's where if anywhere, I think that maybe Carolina might look to make a splash, because I think they would like to move Brady Shea. They would like to move on from him and maybe bring in, maybe a Jacob Chikrin or bring in a John Klingberg and, make a long-term commitment to someone like that, honestly.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, that's, it's hard because, they are negotiating from a position of strength on defense. They do have one of the better defenses in the league, but they aren't spending much money on it. I mean, their top 6, they're not even at $20 million for their whole entire defense.
Right, which is great, right? So, but you also have to consider too, yes, they've got Jake Gardner on long-term IR.
And he's out all year. Right.
Yeah, he's not coming back. So that's another thing too, that maybe they're kind of missing a little bit, right? I wouldn't mind, seeing a defender in there that can maybe bring a little bit of grit too. So if maybe you don't want to swing big, you want to bring in somebody who can bring the grit a little bit more. Because look, with Tony DeAngelo out, obviously Ethan Bear's got a few more minutes, and to me, he's not a guy that I expect to, push the needle in either direction and really play that hard-nosed style of game or really push for that big offensive type,
Yeah, he's fine. He's a fine third pairing defenseman. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Ian Cole, to me, he's been up and down this year. He's not someone that I'm really going to rely upon. He's a great number 6, number 7 defenseman, but other than that, I'm not really looking for him to play any bigger minutes. And so to me, I think, you could look all the way to, for example, you could look at a Josh Manson, right, from Anaheim. If they start to slip out a little bit or, slide away from a playoff spot, maybe they make a play for a guy like that who, again, can play some really tough, gritty minutes, or maybe even a Colin Miller in Buffalo.
Yeah. When it comes to Carolina, though, I mean, I think they're going to stick with this depth. There is a chance, though. I mean, just maybe in a strange world, there's a chance that, they do have UFAs themselves, which is an interesting scenario. They've got Nino Niederreiter. He's having a pretty good season. He's got 29 points this year. Vincent Drochek is having a really nice year. He's actually been able to stay healthy. He's got 37 points, 15 goals. He'll end up with a little over 20 goals. I think that 30 goal season is very much an anomaly for him. But he's a 50-point guy. And not that you're not that you're dying to trade one of them or both of them, but maybe there's a scenario where you think you can upgrade somewhere and you could give up a Nino Niederreiter to upgrade in a different area at like the center position, or with a Jacob Chychrun if that were coming the other way. It wouldn't be Niederreiter going to Arizona for Chychrun, but if you needed to move Niederreiter to acquire some other, like a first round pick, which Carolina does not have, maybe you're moving out a Niederreiter to balance your team a little bit more. I don't know. That's probably an unlikely scenario, but you do have to consider the Hurricanes. Niederreiter, Trocheck, there's a chance neither one of those guys signs there next year, and that's going to leave a big hole for the Hurricanes. So maybe you're thinking now, but you're also thinking later on, because historically Carolina isn't a place where big name players just go sign there in the offseason. So they're signing guys like an Anthony DeAngelo, somebody who is a talented player, had some troubles off the ice, and he's willing to take a pay cut, come to Carolina. I mean, you got to be a special player to want to come to Carolina, because Rod Brind'Amour's a great coach. He's hard. He's going to work you. So I think there's maybe some of that too, and knowing that the owner of the team is kind of cheap. I think that maybe would bring a little bit of uncertainty to your position with the team, and the team's desire to pay for high-end players hasn't been there. They've historically signed guys to less because it's a nice place to live, and maybe that's held the Carolina Hurricanes back from being the elite team over the course of a long time. But yeah, I don't know if is it time to start thinking about the future, or are we just going for it here? You're probably just going for it.
Yeah, another piece, again, I think if they do make a splash, right, I'm not really concerned about them spending money, in free agency. I think, again, they're willing at this point, with the team playing so well, they're willing to spend the money. But the concern for me is, if they do want to take a swing for the fences and bring in a big name player, money's got to go out, right? And you mentioned, Nino Ryder. I think he's a guy who could be on the move. But another name that I think potentially could move to a team that maybe is willing to take a chance on somebody who maybe is looking for, younger players, maybe rebuilding their franchise right now, is a Jesperi Kotkaniemi, right? So he's got an offer sheet coming this offseason that I don't think Carolina wants to give him.
Oh, his they have to match him.
Right. So he's going to be
$7 million, right?
Exactly. So obviously with his production and what he's shown this year, he's not a $7 million guy. Now, if for some reason, behind the scenes, again, not knowing what's going on behind closed doors, maybe they're working on an extension, say like a 4 mil, 5-year extension or something like that, where they can get him. I don't think so either.
He's got 22 points. He's got 11 goals in 50 games. So I mean, maybe he hits 20 goals, which he needs one more goal, and he's got his career high in goals. So he's not really. No one's looking at him saying, "Oh, this guy needs to be a 30-goal scorer." No. But I think you're hoping that he can put up 50 points.
Right. There's teams out there that are going to take a chance on him because maybe they think at 21 he can still be a number 2 center on your team, right?
That's the thing. He's only 21. I mean, how many guys do you see teams give up on, and then, at 24 he has a career year, and oops, you shouldn't have given up on him, kind of thing,
Sure, but again, this comes back to Carolina. If they want to make a splash in the offseason, if they want to bring in a long-term piece like a Klingberg or a Chychrun, at the deadline here, they've got to think long-term, and having to give Kotkaniemi a $7 million offer this offseason is not going to work out for that. So, He's a guy I think, again, just pay attention to going down this stretch where I think they might try to move him.
Okay. I like that thought process. I mean, I haven't heard anybody talking about Kotkaniemi, but it's a great thought because, yeah, I mean, do you want to have a $7 million Kasperi Kotkaniemi? No. And you know what? You have to, I mean, they have to give him an offer sheet, or they have to match give him an offer for what he's got. So you have to do that in order to secure him. And he can say, no, I'll just sign my 1 year at $7 million. And then you know what? The next year they have to match him again. And then he gets another raise. And then he's at $8 million almost. And then he can do it again. Like, he can just keep on doing that. It's kind of the NFL's version of the franchise tag in some respects. I mean, I know the franchise tag doesn't come till unrestricted free agency in the NFL, but this is that style. Like, hey, you're making this much. Well, guess what? Next year you're guaranteed to be making a little bit more as long as you don't accept a contract. Which, on the one hand, that's like betting on yourself all day long. I mean, what would you take? Would you take $20 million over 5 years? Or would you go, you know what? I get $7 million next year, and then I'm going to get more probably, or I'm going to just become an unrestricted free agent, and I guarantee you that you'll be able to get $4 million in the open market, especially in the years to come as the cap starts to go up. And I think it's going to be tough to justify, or for him to justify, I'll sign a long-term deal at much less. I don't think he will.
Yeah, that's the gamble.
Then you just just go ahead and, I mean, you don't have to match and you can let me go be a free agent, and then he can be 21-year-old UFA and go sign wherever he wants.
Right, but here's the thing. If he goes and, like, say a team, right, he gets traded to, I don't know, like, say they make a deal, they bring in a guy like, Jacob Chikrin, for example, and he goes to Arizona, right? And they maybe spend, I don't know, they didn't give up much in terms of, he was basically like a piece that came over just to move dollars, right? So there was really no risk. They get their other pieces, first rounder or whatever, else, Carolina throws in with that. But say they've got really no risk involved with this guy, and they say, cool, we're not going to re-sign you. We're just going to let you hit the market. And now maybe he goes out there. I know they wouldn't, but let's just say in this scenario that happens, right? And now he goes out in the market, and none of these other teams look at him and say, we're not giving you $3 or $4 million. We saw what you tried to do, why you tried to handcuff Carolina or Arizona. We're not going to take a gamble on you like that, so we're just going to give you $2 million. And now you've kind of screwed yourself out of a potential contract, and now maybe, mentally you're second-guessing yourself. Am I really that good of a player? And next thing you know, you're just kind of a washout guy.
Montreal would go sign him.
I know they would.
Just to be like, screw you guys. We're taking them back for free.
Right.
We got our draft picks and we got the player. All right. Well, let's move on from the Carolina Hurricanes now. I think we've dove in pretty deep. We'll see what kind of moves they make, and hopefully both their goalies continue to stay healthy, because this is that time of year. It's that time of year when Frederik Andersen, he's churning along, things are looking great, and then he takes an extra long stride across the crease, and then the rest of your year looks like Game 7 against the Bruins. All right. Actually, that wasn't him. That was James Reimer. So.
Still.
It's just etched in my heart, etched in my soul forever and ever.
Oh, boy.
All right, let's go to the second-place team in the division, a surprising Pittsburgh Penguin team. I don't think we're surprised that they're in the playoff picture at all. I mean, they still have tons of talented players on this team, very high-end elite players. But with so many injuries early on, we were like, this team needs to hang on and hope then that they can drag themselves back into the playoffs like they have done the last couple of years. But they were never out of it. I mean, they were always right there in the playoff picture, always mostly in the top 3 in this division, sometimes that wild card position, and now they're pretty sturdy sitting in second place. Only 3 points ahead of the Rangers, but it looks like the Penguins will find their way into the top 3 of this division, assuming things keep going the way that they're going. And boy, if there's a team out there that is a pure buyer, like, the future be damned, because Crosby's 34, Malkin's 35, Letang's 34. We got to get going and see if we can win another cup. What do the Penguins do? What does Brian Burke and Ron Hextall do to push the Penguins over the cliff of winning the Stanley Cup?
Yeah, you mentioned it, right? The old guys, right? Their four centermen, Crosby, Malkin, Carter, and Brian Boyle. None of them are under the age of 34. So they are definitely pushing for a Stanley Cup here. I mean, again, I think honestly, if I'm the GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, if I'm Ron Hextall, honestly, I'm not making any big moves, right? I'm not going all in because I think you have to think a little bit long term, right? What happens if Malkin goes to Russia or doesn't resign or goes somewhere else, right? What if Chris Letang goes and signs somewhere else and you can't get him locked up, right? Again, all these scenarios that may or may not happen, but at that point you have to say, okay, crap, well, now we got to hit the reset button and, figure out what Crosby wants to do. But, to me, I think if you can make a move and bring in a big name piece, yes, that would be great. But I think with roughly, $3 million in cap space at the deadline that they're going to have,
which isn't bad for a playoff team to have almost $3 million in cap space. I mean, for their for the deadline space, about $3 million, which is more than a lot of teams have.
Right, absolutely. Now, if it was me, I mean, personally, what I would do is I would look for a bottom six forward for this team and a backup goaltender. I think that's where my concern would be the most. Just because, one, if Tristan Jarry goes down with any sort of injury, you're screwed. There's no way I'm taking or riding Casey DeSmith into the playoffs or into the final stretch down into the playoffs here past the deadline. This guy has been below average. I would rather take, Koskinen at this point, or Mike Smith out of Edmonton. And so, to me, those are the two moves I'm doing. And if I'm targeting anybody, right, if I'm Pittsburgh, maybe when I'm looking at goaltenders, maybe I'm looking at, again, you have to look at cheap options. I might look across the state at a guy like Martin Jones, maybe, again, a little further upstate at Craig Anderson in Buffalo, or maybe even across the country at Scott Wedgwood out of Arizona. Those are guys that are going to be cheap. You're going to come in, and I know I'm going to get decent production out of those guys. And again, all three of those goaltenders I would take over Casey DeSmith right now at this point, the way they're playing, especially Craig Anderson. I remember when he came into Washington and basically almost saved their bacon in the playoffs.
Yeah. Certainly down the stretch, too. There's a lot of games that are about to be played. It would help Tristan Jarry to not have to play the vast majority of those.
Absolutely.
That's very important.
If I want to go for, depth at the forward position, I might look, maybe at Seattle and go Carl Jarnkrok. I think he's a guy who can.
That's what I was actually going to say. Calle Jarnkrok is one of my targets for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I feel like he reminds me a little bit of like a Nick Bonino, like just a Hagelin, somebody who can just come in. They're not necessarily going to score a bunch of goals, but he's played in enough playoff games. I mean, Calle Jarnkrok. He's been in the playoffs almost every year. I think every year of his career he's made the playoffs. So if he doesn't get traded, this will be the first year he doesn't make the playoffs. He hasn't put up big points in the playoffs, but he's reliable when it comes down to it. He's having a good year. He's really having one of his better years. I mean, granted, he's playing on a bad team, so he's getting maybe some more opportunities, but he's on pace to break his career high of 16 goals, which he's done twice. He's got 10 goals right now. So he's having a nice year. It would be a good move to bring him in. He'd come in cheap, and I think he'd fit right in because he can play every position too. That's a rare feat.
Right, and especially when you have older guys like Brian Boyle and Jeff Carter, maybe you want to give them a night or two off, right? And especially Brian Boyle, don't get me wrong, I love him. He's a great face-off guy, but you're not going to get a lot of offensive production out of a guy like that. And so maybe you want to, use him as your, 13th forward or something like that and give him, the rest during the playoffs and bring in a guy like Jarnkrok to fill in there at the center position on your fourth line. And, and speaking of centers, maybe a couple other guys I look at who can play the center position, Tyler Ennis or maybe a Sam Gagner. Now, they're not going to bring the grit that a Jarnkrok, I think, would bring you, but they still have, those intangibles, that offensive, finesse that maybe Pittsburgh likes to play with, and I think they could keep up. And especially if needed, if, for example, like, guys like, Kasperi Kapanen, Brian Rust, Jake Gensel, if these guys go down for long periods of time and you need somebody to fill in at those top 6 roles, guys like Tyler Ennis or Sam Gagner could certainly step in and fill those positions on the short term anyways.
Okay. Yeah, that's if the Penguins, I'll say, go small at the deadline, then those are absolutely the type of players that they would go for. I mean, then you're just talking, let's fill in the line, let's fill everything else in, and let's see what we can do. That's maybe the old Ron Hextall kind of way of doing it, is don't take big risks. We trust the team we have, which is a fine way to do it. But I think he may have learned from past mistakes that when the opportunity knocks, sometimes you got to take it. Sometimes you got to go all in. And what better time to go all in than this year, where Malkin and Letang, they might re-sign next year. Great. They're signing probably for less in terms of Malkin, at least. And I think that, then you can keep on going. But maybe this is it for this full iteration of the Penguins. So I think it's time. I think your fans deserve it. These players deserve it, who have been here for so long together. This is your one last chance, and there's one player that, if I were the Penguins, I'd target, and that's Tomas Hertl. Would be a perfect player for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He could play on the wing, on the power play. He can go play on the wing. He can play with Crosby or Malkin. He could, you can slide him up and down the lineup anywhere. Jeff Carter wouldn't have to play center. He could play the wing, and Tomas Hertl can play center. If anyone goes down, let's say Malkin has another injury, he goes down, you've got Hertl, who can slot up on that second line just beautifully. And based on what I think you'd have to give up to acquire Hertl, you're talking a first-round pick, and then you're talking probably a prospect or maybe another high draft pick. Maybe a first and a second, and then like a B prospect, something like that. So the Penguins could definitely do it. They have the cap space because Pittsburgh or San Jose could eat half the contract, or they could move them to somewhere else, give a 4th round pick, and have them eat half. There's lots of ways around that. They've got enough room to where that's not an issue based on what Hertl makes. And tell me, with Tomas Hertl, that the Penguins don't all of a sudden look like legitimate Stanley Cup contenders.
Yeah, assuming everybody's healthy, right?
Sure. I mean, that's the assumption for every team in the National Hockey League. Everyone needs to be healthy, right, probably, in order to win.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would think they're contenders alone right now with Crosby and Malkin playing the way they are, and Letang, to me, is playing probably his best hockey I've seen him play since they're in like 5 or 6 years. Yeah, even probably longer than that, maybe best ever, but. Again, I think, the big key for me is Tristan Jarry, who hasn't been the guy for any sort of playoff success. And so, again, he went last year, 6 games, .888 save percentage, over 3 goals against. Are you going to get an elite goaltender in the playoffs, or are you going to get this mediocre, below average goaltender? So if he can step in the playoffs and, raise his game up a little bit, now he doesn't need to play necessarily at, a 952s, or 940 save percentage to win. If he can give them 19s, maybe 920s in the playoffs, I think this team could be poised to go deep, especially, in the Metro, where maybe, they don't have to worry about super high scoring teams like, Florida or Tampa Bay to step up and play first anyways. I
mean, it sure looks like the Penguins and the Rangers have a date right now.
Right.
They're both kind of locked in where they are, and of course, plenty can change. They're playing each other twice at the end of March, on the 25th and the 28th. So a potential little preview there of that. They did play each other last week, and Pittsburgh won 1-0. So
yeah, and the Rangers aren't a high scoring team. So
right, you're right, and that certainly helps. But yeah, Pittsburgh has been that team in the playoffs that they come charging in, they come hot, and they've met a better defensive team. So at the same time, it would worry me with the Rangers, a good defensive team with the best goaltender in the world right now. That's going to be a difficult beat as well. Okay, let's continue to the Rangers. It's a good little transition there. And I'm wondering here, the New York Rangers, do we see Lafreniere or Kaapo Kakko traded at the deadline to bring in players that can actually contribute? Is that the piece that they use? Dangling those out there. That and, I'm forgetting the name of the player who is a Russian, Kravtsov. Vitaly Kravtsov.
Yes.
I
do agree. I think one of those three guys will go. Now, I think Lafreniere is probably the odd man out. I think he's safe. I don't think they move him because, again,
with
Lafreniere,
pick.
Yes, he's a first overall pick. But not only that, too, I think it's been a little unfair for him because he's a natural left winger, and they've been trying to force him on that right wing all season long, and it just really hasn't worked out as well as they had hoped. And I think that's no fault of his. I mean, when you've got Chris Kreider and Panarin on the left wing on the depth chart, what else are you going to do with this guy? So at 20 years old, there's still time for him to feel it out. And maybe, he's slated to be a third line left winger for the rest of his career, which, if he produces well enough, maybe that's okay. I mean, look, Phil Kessel on the third line worked out all right for Pittsburgh. So, maybe that's what you get out of Lafreniere moving forward. But if I'm this Rangers team, right, the one big piece that I'm targeting is a top six right winger, because again, like I mentioned, Lafreniere just hasn't been the guy that they've hoped for on that right wing. And so to me, I mean, the one name that I've been hearing pop up lately, and this is the guy that I really get excited about, create the reunion, right? And, yes, he might not get traded. I think Vancouver would be stupid to trade this guy, but there have been rumblings, and, usually when there's smoke, there's fire. And to me, JT Miller would be a perfect fit back in New York to come back, have the reunion, and sign in long term. I think he would be ideal to put in a top six position on the right wing. You could slot him on that second line with Panarin and Strome. Now you get a little bit more grit, and you get a guy like JT Miller who, if needed, can swap in and play center.
Can literally play anywhere you want him to play.
Right, because Strome's an okay face-off guy, but he's not, the best. And so when it gets a little bit grittier, when it gets a little bit tougher to take those draws at the end of the game, maybe you throw a JT Miller in there who's pretty good at face-off. So to me,
and don't forget, JT Miller is signed for another year after this. So I do think the cost is going to be pretty high for JT Miller.
Right, which is why if you throw in a guy like Kaapo Kakko, for example, a number 2 overall pick, a guy who's only 21 and really is not going to cost you a lot to re-sign this year, maybe $3-4 million at the most. Ideally, with a cap-strapped team like the Vancouver Canucks, that would be, a nice little consolation piece, if you want to call it that. And then, of course, you'll go after you'll try to maybe get 3 pieces out of this, maybe a first-round pick, second-round pick, or a prospect, what have you. So to me, I think that would be pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean, Kakko he's been hurt, right? But
yes,
he was playing with Zibanejad and Kreider on that top line. So I mean, it's not as if the Rangers have given up on him. I mean, he hasn't. He's got 14 points in 37 games. He's been really good on the penalty kill. They have missed him on the penalty kill being a hurt. It's so hard. I mean, if you trade Kaapo Kakko and then all of a sudden he becomes a superstar, no, it's not worth it for JT Miller. That's the hard thing. I think that's where it's likely that it'll be Kravtsov who's traded. I mean, he's still someone who's highly touted. I guess maybe the one thing that you're concerned about, I mean, he's not going to play this year. He's in the KHL. I don't think that he'd come back. And the concern, of course, is going to be that he's Russian. And what's going on in the world right now, is he going to come to the NHL at all? I mean, there's already been a lot of reports about players experiencing some, I'll just say racist kind of stuff happening to them, death threats, and all because they're Russian. I mean, obviously these hockey players aren't the ones doing any of the the bombing, but yet because they're Russian, they're being targeted by people and nasty things happening, and that's that is going to weigh on on players. And if it determines where they're going to go next year, I mean, maybe a lot of them just say, I'm just going to stay in the KHL, where I know I'm probably more safe from backlash of what Russia's doing. And that would make me really hesitant about Kravtsov, because he's already shown that he's a little bit, I'll just say,
a diva.
Angsty. Diva's one way, angsty's another. That is what would make me concerned, is that you're really trading for somebody that you have no guarantees you're ever even going to see.
Right.
Like,
and that's
literally,
why
you might never see him in person. You might not see him because he might not come over. You don't know.
That's why I think a guy like Capo Caco is going to be so valuable as a trade asset
but you
for this
want
team.
you're going to have to give up a lot to get him, I think. He's just too young. I mean.
Yeah, but if you can bring in a guy like JT Miller, I mean, I would do it in a heartbeat, because you get a proven entity in a guy like JT Miller versus a guy who may or may not still turn out. I mean, I look at Columbus and Winnipeg, right? That Pierre-Luc Dubois for, Patrick Laine deal. And it again, Patrick Laine, was a superstar prior to the trade, but you still made the move to bring in a top 6 center. And I think, New York's got to make that kind of move. And now they don't have to give up a guy who was a proven 40 goal scorer, right? So they don't have to give up a guy who was a potential superstar. They get a guy who might be a superstar. So,
all right. Yeah,
I don't know. And I think if maybe they want to go, a little bit cheaper, maybe you can go to a Vegas, for example, and target a guy like Riley Smith, who might get moved just because of cap, issues with Alec Martinez, or, if Mark Stone comes back early, they might have to move some money out. Or maybe you go after a guy like Joe Pavelski, right? Who's a guy who can play on the right wing or play center too.
The Rangers only have $32 million in deadline cap space.
No issues there.
So yeah, they can trade for literally anyone right now. Multiple superstar high end players if they so had the resources. It's gonna be interesting. They're like one of the only teams where, I mean, they barely have more cap space next year than they do this year, and they have multiple players coming off the books because of their Adam Fox deal and Zibanejad re-signing. They've got a couple big re-signings that they've done in this year. But yeah, the Rangers, when I look at them, do I see a team that's going to win the Stanley Cup this year? I mean, they probably are that next tier of like, well, yeah, they of course have the chance. Everybody, they have to keep playing the way they're playing right now and get incredible goaltending. There's with the Rangers though, on the forward position, Artemi Panarin, fantastic. Kreider having a career year. Zibanejad's really good. I'm wondering if they're missing that depth scoring that you'd like to see from a team that's going to win the cup. Like, I don't look in their bottom 6 and go, ooh, that player is going to have a really nice playoff for them. I mean, Barclay Goodrow, I know that he's there because of that, because of his history. But other than him, I don't know that there's a lot in that top 6 or bottom 6. And that is always an issue come playoff time. So that's going to be probably their, if they can find scoring down the roster, the Rangers have a chance. If they don't, they're probably losing the first round.
Yeah, that very well could be true. Now, let me throw out 2 names to you because, again, their new GM came out and said that they're going to go through a full rebuild. If you're the Rangers, are you willing to take a chance on maybe a Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves?
All day for Patrick Kane. I've got all day for Patrick Kane.
All day, yes, sir.
All day. I mean, he's he's got what, $10.5 million next year. If Chicago's willing to hang on to half that, I'm willing to do a lot of things to get Patrick Kane on my team.
Can you imagine
Panarin and Kane?
Oh my God.
Well, where does Kreider somewhere else? Like, unbelievable. That's a team that has no centers and just a ton of wingers.
There's your right wing problem right there. So Patrick Kane all day.
I'll take Patrick Kane over JT Miller. Just a slight nudge.
Okay, I don't disagree with you.
Although JT, not knocking JT Miller, he's just not more than a point per game guy like Kane is. Kane's having a real nice season this year too. Yeah,
with no center, mind you, too.
True, with no center. All right, well, should we hit our last team? Which, I mean, speaking of the Blackhawks, Marc-Andre Fleury, he's got to be going somewhere, right? Like, got to be.
Well, I've been hearing this last team. Heard their name a few times.
The Washington Capitals. Would Marc-Andre Fleury betray the Pittsburgh Penguins and go play for the Washington Capitals? Wasn't it the Washington Capitals that beat Vegas in the Cup final?
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was. So, he's lost to the Capitals a lot. But he's also beat the Capitals a lot. I guess he hasn't lost to them that much because when the Penguins played them, the Penguins always beat them. Okay, the Capitals. Is there a team in the league that reminds you more of like 2010 Detroit Red Wings? Maybe 2011, somewhere that team where you look at their roster and you go, how are they still doing this? This is amazing. They just keep on going. And every year you go, this will probably be they're in the playoffs again. And hey, they could win a round. They could win the cup if things go right. I mean, that's this team. They could win the cup if things go right. And Kuznetsov has had a really nice rebound from a tumultuous year last year with the Capitals. I mean, he's 50 points in 52 games. He's played great. Worth every penny. This Capitals team is just, I'd say, what game was I watching? I was watching them, and the broadcaster said, they still have so much talent, but they're just not as fast as they were when they won the Cup in 2017. And that's such an accurate depiction of this team. Like, they're still a really good team, lots of talent, but the speed just isn't there in comparison to their counterparts within the division and within the conference.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, you look at the ages, right, of their core group of players. I mean, Backstrom's 34, Ovechkin's 36. All he does is just sit up at the top of the circle and score goals. TJ Oshie's 35. Tom Wilson, he's 27, but he was never the fastest guy in the world anyways. I mean,
they only have one defenseman under the age of 30.
Right.
That's unbelievable.
And none of these guys were, besides John Carlson on defense, are known as big, fast-moving, playmaking guys. I mean, Justin Schultz used to be, but to me now he's sort of, his game has sort of changed a little bit. I think he's more of a sit back and let the game come to him type guy. But, again, it's speed, right? Speed kills, and I think that's where the NHL is these days. And so, Washington has to win in different ways, right? They've got to kill you on special teams. They've got to beat you as far as, they've got to – I think if, like, you took this team from Washington and kind of put them into a, Calgary Flame type defensive system where you're trying to win games 2-1, they would probably flourish a lot more, right? Because you're sitting back waiting for teams to make mistakes, and then you're pouncing on them. I think that would have them, a little bit more successful. But to me, again, the age is a concern. And the fact that, again, they don't have – they've got $3.8 million to play with at the deadline, and they could probably move some money out, to create a little bit more room. But, they don't really have the type of goaltending that's going to steal you a series. They don't really have, outside of Ovi and, Kuznetsov and Backstrom, they don't really have the offense in terms of middle six that's really going to go out there and, help really – that I would say, like, okay, good. If their top line can't get it done, we've got other guys down here that can support us, can, provide the offense, right? And I think, getting Anthony Mantha back at some point is going to be great. But he's not a line driver. He's not, going to go out there and steal the show for you. So that's where my biggest concern is for this team is, how are they going to score when Ovechkin is getting shut down, right? Because, again, not the fastest team, so he's not going to beat you with speed. And if teams can find a way to neutralize him other ways, especially on the power play, how is this team going to beat you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that's what everybody's been saying for Ovechkin's whole career. If we can just neutralize him on the power play, we'll beat the Capitals. He always scores in the playoffs. I mean, he's very rarely not scored goals in droves in the playoffs. I mean, he had 1 year where in 7 games he only had a goal. That was 12-13. Last year he had 2 goals in 5 games. You know that he's finding ways to score. You're not worried about Ovechkin scoring in the playoffs, but it's the rest of the team that needs to go. And Kuznetsov, not great last year. I mean, that was a huge. He only played 3 games in the playoffs. He went 0 for 0 for 0 all the way across the board. And this is a different team this year with Kuznetsov. It's going to come down to goaltending, though. I mean, Vitek Vanacek only played in 2 games all of February. He gets hurt against the Penguins on February 1st, and then he goes in against the Leafs in backup, and he actually played really well. Just 3 days ago, he played really well in a losing. They lost, but only allowed 1 goal on 17 shots, and played a pretty good game. Held the Capitals in that one for as long as he could. But it's ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. I don't think Samsonov's the answer. I also don't really think Vitek Vanacek is the long-term answer. I think that they're fine, but in the playoffs where you need somebody to step up, they're going to need to make a trade. What needs to happen for them to get Marc-Andre Fleury in here? Because that is the best move that the Capitals could make, in my opinion.
Right. No, I don't disagree with you. I think Marc-Andre Fleury is the obvious pick for any team that needs help on goaltending, right? Edmonton, maybe even Vegas if you're starting to worry about Leonard a little bit. But again, I don't think that Fleury, again, he's going to control his own destiny, right? He's come to management, has basically said that, hey, whatever you want to do, we'll support you. If you want to go out, we'll move you. If you want to stay, we'll let you stay. I don't think he wants to go to Washington. Obviously, he wants to win a cup. He might look at a Colorado. He might look at a Vegas and be willing to go to those teams. Maybe Edmonton, cap issues withstanding. But I don't think he's going to want to go to Washington. I think for a guy who has got a lot of shit, from...
Hey, Jágr went to the Flyers.
Yeah, I will give you that. Jágr did go to the Flyers. But I just think that this team is not going to go make a move for a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury, who's going to be the prize goaltending, asset this deadline. So they're just not going to be willing to risk a lot of futures to get him. I think if you want to look at cheaper options who maybe they go after a guy with a lot of proven playoff success, which is probably what they would like to get in a guy like Fleury. I think you look at a guy who used to play there, Braden Holtby. To me,
that would be interesting.
He's been having a pretty decent year in Dallas. And I think at some point, obviously Ottinger is the guy there in Dallas. I think they're going to play him out. They're going to give him, if they do make the playoffs, they're going to give him the starts.
Yeah,
so
but,
I think if you're,
but it's not as if Holtby has had a good year. Why would you want to bring Holtby in when he's played really not that much better than what you've got already?
Well, so again, it's the playoff success, right? It's the fact that he's been able to come in.
Yep.
Yeah, he's won them a cup. So I think, again, he's playing at a .912 save percentage right now on a team that can't really score a ton of goals. And so I think, if he goes to a team like Dallas or like Washington from Dallas, I think, again, even if he plays at slightly better than the .912, .915, maybe .920, I think would be exactly what Washington would want out of their goaltender. Right. And so I think this is a guy who went in and, has won them a cup. So he knows what it takes to compete at that level. He knows what it takes to go deep in the playoffs. That would be a great addition for them. But if they want to go even cheaper, right, maybe you could look at a guy like Anton Forsberg out of Ottawa, who's 29, who, again, doesn't have the credentials a guy like Holtby or Fleury does. But, I would probably throw him in there, see what he can do. And if maybe, a guy like Vanacek just isn't cutting it for you in the playoffs, then maybe you give a guy like Forsberg a look.
Yeah, but, I guess they had an opportunity to get Forsberg off of waivers. I don't know that.
Sure.
Yeah,
but at that point, honestly, if you're bringing in a guy like Forsberg, you're not looking for him to really steal anybody's job. I think you would bring him in, on a injury basis, right? Somebody goes down, but
Washington's in a pretty similar place that the Penguins are in. They're an older team. They're going to age out. It is time to do something here. They've got almost $4 million in cap space. They could also, there's players that they could move out that are down their lineup to make a little bit more room. So there's options for the Washington Capitals, and it's it's probably do or die here with this group. I mean, you're not going to see this group performing at as high of a, again, this is just like the Red Wings. Well, they're not going to be as good next year, and then next year they're just as good. But is this just like we're like twiddling our fingers here? That they're going to make the playoffs, but they're going to get run over. They're going to lose in 6 games. Their experience will win them a game or two, or maybe a round, but they're not going to win the cup. I mean, this team's not going to win the cup. So you need to put yourself in a position to be able to say, I think we could win the cup. We need to make a move, but we could win the cup. They've got draft picks. They could do this thing. I think it's just a matter of, are they willing to give up assets to acquire who they need to get? Because they're similar to a lot of teams where they do have their high end talent, and then they need to fill in the bottom part of their roster, which tends to happen at the trade deadline. So we'll see if Washington can find a goalie and fill the rest in. But it's going to be tough for Washington to beat Carolina. Remember, that's who they would play in the first round. Remember, that was kind of the Carolina was playing the Washington Capitals, and they beat the Capitals in the playoffs, and it was like, holy crap, this Carolina team's for real. They beat the Capitals, and now things are flipped. Now the Capitals are kind of that that team you kind of expect to lose in the first round. In Carolina, you're looking at them to blow through the Capitals, in my estimation. And it'll be interesting to see what happens come playoff time, because that's sure how it looks like it's going to shake out.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, right? So if you're Washington's GM, do you say, do I want to risk future assets, knowing that maybe, again, our chances are pretty slim against Carolina. Yes, you could go out and win. You have the playoff pedigree to do so, but
are you going to beat Carolina and then Pittsburgh or New York and then Tampa, Toronto, Florida, Boston? Right. Are you going to beat three of those teams? I don't think so. I don't think they've got the manpower to do it.
No, I agree. And that's why I think, and the goaltending is the concern for me, right? Bigger than anything else. And to me, I just honestly, I don't have a lot of faith in this Washington team, not only being successful in the playoffs, but down the stretch too. And that's why I mentioned earlier that I think if there's any team that could fall out, it could be Washington, and Columbus could find a way to sneak in. That
would be unexpected at this point with what, 30 games left to go, less than that, 27-ish, 28 games left to go.
Yeah. And Columbus is a team with absolutely zero pressure, right, to win anything. And Washington has all the pressure to continue winning because they got old guys that are still on big contracts for a while. Yeah,
it's another reason why I think they could use a shakeup. Like, they need to probably trade for someone who can just calm everybody down. And that's going to be a goaltender. If it's not Marc-Andre Fleury, there are some other options out there that they could explore. But probably, I mean, the Blue Jackets aren't going to make a deal with them. They're not going to give up Korpisalo to send.
And is he better than what you've got right now, anyways?
Yeah, I think so, but that's not a confident I think so. I don't have that much confidence in that statement. So, maybe if the St. Louis Blues are willing to part with Ville Husso, but
no way.
Yeah, no, they're going to hang on to him. The
way Binnington's been playing, right? You can't.
I mean, if you want a starting goaltender right now, it's Chicago is the only team that you're probably calling. Maybe Dallas, but I don't know why Dallas in a position where they're trying to make the playoffs, why they would give up their backup goalie. That wouldn't make any sense either. So maybe you can convince the Kraken to deal Drieger. That would be that is something that if you're the Kraken, that's what I'd be looking at. I mean, he's cheap, and it would be easy. Hey, they could trade him to another team. They keep half, and then you don't have to hang on to any money. I don't know if anyone would want to hang on to 3 years worth or 2 more years worth of money, but he's only at 3.5. I mean, you could trade for Driedger right now, and he could be your starting goalie for the next 3 years. That's not a bad position to be in either. I know that he's kind of struggled in Seattle, but everyone in Seattle has struggled. Yeah. I think you're willing to hope that he's at least somewhere in the middle of that 927, 938 that he had a couple years ago, and the 893 he is right now. Like, maybe he's a 920 goaltender, and that would be fantastic. I think he's the one you go out and if you're looking long term, maybe you probably don't have to give up a ton for Driedger, but you'll have to give up some like B level type of things, probably multiples of them, to be able to bring him in. But all right, well, that's I think that about covers the top end of that Metro Division. We'll keep going on our playoff team stuff. We'll probably have to grab a few teams from a few different divisions, as we've kind of tackled most of the divisions, or at least most of these high end teams. So we'll just string a few of them together, and we'll be back for another show. Justin, I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, you too, sir.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys later. Find us on Twitter @OT Hockey Talk. Until next time.